This is not a drill, this is happening. Listen, did I swear off these books? Yes, I did. Am I still going to read them? Yes. Why? Because if Colleen Hoover profits, I might as well do so myself. All jokes aside, I'm not here to yuck on anybody's yum. I know what that feels like. I eat peanut butter from a spoon, and I openly admit things on the internet that people would find embarrassing, so like, who am I to judge, right? You enjoy what you enjoy. I have a rocky relationship with Miss Hoover. I think it's very up and down. It'll depend on the book. It'll depend on the instance. And so, I'm here to give her another chance. That's a lie. I'm actually here to give her 3 more chances. And we'll see how this goes because I'm not very confident, but we are starting with Ugly Love. Ugly Love, and let me tell you something, I'm 107 pages in and already horrified. Is that a bad thing to say? I was walking into this not knowing absolutely anything, and yet I find myself cringing about every other line. Basically, for a synopsis, we follow our main character Tate, and she is an ER nurse. She ends up moving to her brother Corbin's apartment, and one of her neighbors ends up being Miles, who is also one of Corbin's friends, and it just descends into madness from there because these two strike this friends with benefits situation without really being friends, and the false sense of closeness between these two. It's actually driving me a little bit crazy because she keeps reinforcing that their conversations are so weird, but they've barely had any conversations to begin with, and every conversation has been confrontational because he seemed very much not into her and very repulsed by her presence, and so it was very combative. Also, the fact that at one point they crash her apartment because it's a boys thing, because they have to watch the game together and because they can't do it anywhere else, and she relents. And that's the worst part, is that Miss Hoover has given this main character absolutely no agency, one, and second of all, no backbone, because these men keep saying and doing whatever the fuck they want to do, and she's like, oh my god, yes, my bad, I'm wrong. No, that's your apartment. If they're in there and you don't want them to be in there, kick them the fuck out. It's well within your right to do that. Also, his POVs, for the most part, his chapters are written in verse, but it's very much giving, I'm a girly pop who believes that things are deeper than they actually are, so I upload Tumblr, Instagram poetry. It's giving that, and I hate that. And also the fact that Miles' POV is in the past and not in the present, and we get to observe how he actively falls in love or becomes obsessed with his stepsister when they're 17 in an adult romance is definitely something I didn't think I'd get to read, nor did I want to read, and I still stand by the point that I don't want to read this because it's making me incredibly uncomfortable. And to add to that, this man is riddled with toxic masculinity and obsession and so many patriarchal beliefs that it's actually pretty crazy. Miles at one point mentions how every male has to at least get attention once in his life, and he makes it very much a point to mention how it's only the guys. I got detention in high school. I almost got suspended in high school. It's really not only a boy thing. And then he gets a lot of joy, very oddly so, in seeing women do female things like cooking or doing the dishes. This man was very indifferent towards our main character Tate up until he sees her do the dishes and then he smiles. I don't love that. Also, these obsessive thoughts with Rachel about, I'm gonna fall in love with Rachel, she is gonna fall in love with me, she is going to love me, she is going to be mine. The possessive language is already so unbelievably toxic, especially for somebody who in his POV for the entirety of it so far is 17 years old. Is there a single thing about this book I am enjoying? I can tell you right now, no. We'll see if she realizes at any point of this book that that's what it is, but honestly, I have zero hope. This has got to be the worst phrasing I've ever seen for somebody kissing somebody else. Miles is in my mouth. He's invading me again. Invade me? Invade me? Invade me? Somebody take me out. Oh my god, no! Please don't. Oh god, and he says brace yourself. This fucking disgusting. For being horrified? What should I brace myself for? Not slam. Nobody is slamming into anyone. She said animalistic. The only animalistic thing I want to do right now is rip this book to shreds. She did not just say I let him fuck me. She says what the hell is wrong with him? I mean, there's plenty wrong with him, girly pop. But how much is wrong with you too? She's so dramatic. This felt like an end? For what? Y'all didn't even start anything. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Honestly, Darkly Love has been finished, and I am so torn on a rating. Part of me is going, give it 1 star because it's sort of what in my mind the book deserves. And the other half of my brain is going, give it 2 stars. It's not pretending to be anything other than what it is. And even though it was a train wreck, at least it's an easy one to fly through, though that's not necessarily a good thing. And listen, I think there is a really big conversation to be had about what exactly goes down with Colleen Hoover as an author in general. Her books are more often than not pitched as a romance, and whether that's coming from the actual writing to the marketing of things or the audience reception, I think there's a lot to be said about why her books are marketed as a romance and exactly what the end product ends up being, where it ends up in this case romanticizing emotional abuse and toxicity and loads of misogyny and again patriarchal beliefs that are so outdated and just so fucked up in so many different ways. And whether it's her writing that ends up romanticizing that, or if the marketing is just all kinds of off, something in there fails. And I think it's a complete disservice to everybody to brand this as a romance. Does it have romantic elements to it? Absolutely yes. That does not inherently make it a romance. Cattail incoming, hello. That doesn't make it a romance, and I think also branding this as a literary fiction is way too generous for what it does. I do wonder if the meaning that people see behind what goes on in this toxic relationship is something that is within the line of the book, which I don't believe it is, or if it's people giving the book a deeper meaning that it actually has. I don't think this is some deep commentary on toxic relationships. I don't know if it's attempting to give commentary on a toxic relationship at all, because it's very confusing in the way that it's structured and the way that it's written. And I think these types of books would be amazing as a literary fiction with an undertone of romance, because then you can provide loads of commentary about toxic relationships and these constant cycles of abuse that women find themselves in because of shit like this, and how it's very hard to notice those patterns to the point that you sometimes don't even realize it. And so I think it lends itself for a lot and doesn't do any of those things. There is absolutely no development in this book. We go from them meeting up to them quote unquote hating each other to then falling in lust, because I don't believe for a second that these two people fell in love ever. I don't know if either of them know the true meaning of love, but they fall in lust with each other. Girly Pop thinks she can fix Miles, which is not at all how it works. And then he keeps giving her the most mixed signals ever, and she takes them and she applies meaning to them in a way that does not exist. And so he ends up being emotionally abusive in so many ways without her realizing it, and she ends up romanticizing every single thing this man does because everything he says is somehow romantic. No, girl, you just want to fuck him, and that's totally fine. And he leaves it very clear very early on that all he wants to do is have sex. And this girl keeps thinking that she can change him and that she will be the first person that he loves. And whether or not that's the end product, it's such a toxic mindset to think that you either A, deserve somebody, or B, that you can change somebody, because that's not the way things work. And then there's no development whatsoever from the point of we're just having sex to the point of, oh my god, I love you, and oh my god, let me open up to you. I do not believe for a damn fucking second that this man was able to overcome all of his life's trauma in 2 weeks. Also, at one point in time, he mentioned how he found it so attractive, or somewhere amongst that wording, that she was so ambitious and she was such a goal-getter and how she was so committed to her job. We never got to see her do any part of her job, and I think that's also a disservice to the characters and a disservice to the dialogue that the book gives us, because we don't get to see any of those things. I don't want you to tell me, I want you to show me. So maybe I will give this 1 star. We've got a package, and we're going to start. It starts with us. Let's talk about It Starts With Us. Mainly, I'm not hating this, and I shouldn't be as surprised as I am, especially because Atlas as the love interest is not toxic at all in comparison to most of Colleen Hoover's love interests, and this romance is nowhere near as insta-lovey as most of her romances go, which is a breath of fresh air. I quite like that in this one we've got a pre-existing, pre-established relationship that we got to observe very closely in book 1, and that at this point it's been spanning out, if not for a decade, decade, then a little bit over a decade. And so I quite like the fact that this has been building for a really, really long time. I have the same criticism for this as I did in book 1, which is the letters to Ellen. I thought we wouldn't be getting those in this book. I absolutely abhorred those in the first one. I hated every single second of it. I thought we were moving past the Ellen love, but I guess from one controversial girly, also known as Colleen Hoover, to another controversial girly, also known as Ellen DeGeneres, I guess it's not that far off that this is still a topic in her book. The subject of letters altogether in this series is not something I enjoy. I feel like it takes me out of the story very, very quickly, and I just don't enjoy reading them, because although it serves as a tool to relive the past and to introduce scenes and moments that are very prevalent for these characters in the past, I just don't enjoy the way that it is executed. And so that is the one part that I constantly go, hate every second of it. However, a good thing to note about this is that it is a direct continuation of book 1. I thought this would be a book that would stand on its own. However, it is an immediate sequel. The first one ends and then this one starts, and it truly does follow the same timeline. So if you haven't read It Ends With Us, this one could be potentially a little bit confusing, but I am quite liking the alternating POVs, because we not only get to see Lily, who was our main character in book 1, but we also get to see Atlas, who was mostly prevalent in the flashback or letter portions of book 1. And I quite like his relationship dynamic with Theo, who is one of his friends slash co-workers, business partners, son. I absolutely love their conversations and their dynamic. I think it is very wholesome, quite enjoying their interactions every time Theo is on page. It's again a breath of fresh air. I love the energy he is bringing into the story, so I quite like that. If you don't know what the series overall is about, we follow our main character Lily, who meets Ryle in the first book. Ryle is a doctor, he's a surgeon in particular, very established, very successful. She very quickly falls in love and unfortunately finds herself in the position of an abusive marriage. The entire first book navigates the dynamics of an abusive relationship. However, the biggest thing with the book is that it is a very hard one to review, if only because it is partly biographical to Colleen Hoover's mom. And so I quite like that this one is easier to review for that reason, because Lily is now out of that relationship and she is trying to build up her life outside of this marriage. And although Ryle is very much still a part of her life, because he is her daughter's father, she is trying to pick the pieces back up and build a life for herself that feels sustainable and that feels exactly like what she would want out of life, and that she does not feel contained and claustrophobic by this man's presence. And part of the reason why this book breaks my heart is that we really get to see the dynamics of Ryle and Lily still in present time, as they are not together, but they are still co-parenting, and not only her still being afraid of him as a person, but also him not fully relinquishing those semblances of control and possessiveness that we got to observe in book 1. Another thing I like about this really is the pace, is the fact that Atlas and Lily are going very slow, despite the fact that they are very well into each other and they know they are into each other. They know they have been into each other for a really long time. They do not rush into anything, not only because of the circumstances surrounding them, but also because Atlas is very respectful of where Lily is at right now and exactly what relationship she left a year ago. And the only other thing that I can tell you that it's kind of off-putting sometimes is the dialogue. Sometimes the dialogue does not feel natural. It does feel a little bit forced on the author's end. But beyond that, nowhere near as unlikable as the first book we read. Got updates for you. I finished it, and although I did like this more than Ugly Love, not by a lot, there are still things execution-wise that I did not enjoy. There are still many a thing that work to this book's detriment. Mainly the things I already mentioned in the past update, but also this book's lack of nuance is something that continues to bother me. It also happened in It Ends With Us, and although I don't think the whole encompassing theme of the series of the books is incredibly unnuanced, I do think that the way certain conversations are taking place lack the nuance they need in order for them to be as impactful as they need to be, one, and two, as the writer thinks they are. Specifically this one, because I won't talk about It Ends With Us because I read that a long time ago, but particularly in this one, there are many passages in which Colleen Hoover really writes as if she is sending a tweet, and she's not saying as much as she hopes to say or as much as she thinks she is saying, because there is no depth to the words. You can say something and you can think, oh my god, I'm such a feminist. You can say something and you can think, oh my god, I did that, but did you really do that? And there are very few instances in this book where the statements that needed to be had were given, and that is definitely something that in this book I did not enjoy. One of the biggest subjects in this book as the book goes on is obviously Lily's past relationship with Ryle. It's a recurring thing and it keeps coming up because they're co-parenting. However, the book lacks the conversation surrounding sometimes when these situations are happening behind closed doors and then people find out, friends and family. It's gonna be a weird line to walk because they're still gonna hold affection over the person committing the crime, but they are also gonna want to hold them accountable. And although it does happen sometimes in the book, how many chances are too many chances on all ends, from friends, from family, from Lily herself? And I think that is something that the book does not explore very well. And Atlas, although significantly less toxic than many of Colleen Hoover love interests, still has his own issues with possessiveness and control. This whole hero complex that he has, and again continues to develop as the book goes on, is really just another form of control for him to show up and help her in whatever way he can. And a lot of the time that's not her choice, but he is just giving those things to her. It's not wholly a bad thing, but it is still a form of control. And not only that, but we see this one particular scene in the book where Ryle and Atlas are having a conversation and it really ruffled my feathers. Ryle is just constantly being aggressive. He has definitely not dropped a lot of his abusive techniques, and the minute he talks to Atlas, he magically starts stepping back. And while it's true that when you've got some really strong support that happens, it really is just playing into the whole internalized misogyny thing that I'm definitely not a fan of, that keeps coming up in books like these. All in all, were there things I enjoyed? Yes. Were there things I didn't enjoy? Yes. Think it falls at like a 2.5 for me, like right smack down the middle, where truly a lot of things could have been done better and I wish they would have been. So that's kind of where I stand with this. And now for the final showdown, we've got November 9. Horrifying. Let me just keep this honest. I think there's loads to be said, as I've mentioned with Ugly Love, about the marketing of these books and these being pitched as romances. I also think there is a lot to be said about romances, fantasy romances, because it tends to cross over with a variety of different genres, how these books end up romanticizing toxic relationships, toxic situations, and end up in a way glorifying them so that people will find them to be the norm. And I think there's also a lot to be said about people reading certain books, and it's happened to me too in the past. Like, I'm not innocent of that, but it happens to a lot of people where sometimes we read books and we open them and we're like, oh my god, it's so good. And I don't know if it's either the fact that we're already desensitized to these things or where it comes down to, but we can't really notice that these things are toxic. And I think this book is the prime example of that. Now, if you don't know what this book is about, we follow our main character, Fallon, and Fallon used to be a child actor. Her father is also an actor, and she was in a fire accident that left her entire left side of the body with burn marks. And because of it, her father always sort of pushed this idea that she would not fit into the acting industry or any sort of industry that relied on the visual just because of her scars. She finds herself believing that because it's always been reaffirmed in her life. And then one day she's having lunch with her dad. They're talking about her moving to New York to pursue acting in Broadway. And it is there that we meet the love interest, Ben. Ben ends up sliding into the booth to save the day, which in and of itself is sort of a red flag. I can't find many instances about why a man should sit down beside you to quote unquote save you. It's supposed to be like a cute act, but it's sort of creepy to begin with. And then not only that, but a lot of what is happening in this book is her building her confidence through his words of affirmation. But his words of affirmation are very backhanded. He constantly reaffirms how people are so uncomfortable looking at her and it's her fault because of the way she dresses and because of the way she acts and because of the way she carries herself. And he is constantly pushing this idea that she shouldn't be ashamed of her body and that starting from now on, you're not gonna allow that shame to come in. It's very sort of keep calm and carry on in the worst way possible because he is not allowing room for the trauma that is already pre-existing in her life, and he is also not acknowledging that at any point of the book, which is very, very disturbing to me. And so there's lines like, you're the one making people uncomfortable and it's your choice to do that, or I hope people laugh at you, because at least it means that you're trying with acting, but that's not the way to say things. Then he was also at some point talking about how he is not an alpha male and he doesn't really fit the stereotype of like a romance novel because she is very into books, which, by the way, there are things that in books just are very cringe. The fact that she keeps mentioning how she has a TBR pile. I know it's supposed to be super quirky. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. And then at some point she's like, well, he's maybe much more of an alpha male than he initially believes. How is that supposed to be cute? There are literal passages in this book like, from now on, when you think about your scars, you aren't allowed to resent them. Sir, who are you to tell her what she can and cannot feel, especially when it's a trauma response? And there is a lot of healing to be done in that. I just absolutely hate how he diminishes the pain she feels. And here's the thing, don't get me wrong, I'm not asking for this book to be completely realistic and to not contain those toxic elements. However, there is a distinction between having toxic elements just for the sake of it and vilifying certain characters just for the sake of it and playing up how people are so evil and how they're so villainous just because you need somebody to hate in the book other than your main characters that are very clearly fucking terrible. There is a difference between that and then actually establishing conversations about toxicity and navigating those conversations in a very nuanced way instead of romanticizing them and glorifying them as we tend to see in these books. And honestly, what it boils down to is I don't need it to be realistic, at least just make it make sense. That's all I ask. Make it make sense, because here the math is not mathing and the literature is not literaturing. Like, I just help. I need help. The book doesn't even need help. Fuck the book. I need help. So yes, I am indeed having a horrible time with this. And I think what is making it even worse for me is the fact that these characters have really only known each other for 5 hours at a time. The very first section of the book is the first November 9th that they experience together. And so they meet, they hang out for about 5 hours-ish, and then they don't see each other again for a year, and then they meet up again in the next November 9th. And it's also like a 5.5-hour meetup. And so at this point, if that's all this book is going to be, like if this whole story is reduced to only like 20 hours of their lives, you can't expect to fall in love with somebody and wholly know who they are in that amount of time. I genuinely need somebody to remind me why I'm reading this willingly. They're having sex. Just girly things. And he tells her, thank you for this beautiful gift. Baby, you have already made this the best sex I've ever had, and I'm not even inside you yet. I'm saying that real slow so y'all can process that, because what the fuck am I reading? To have a reaction right now, not him dictating everything she has to do and how she has to feel, but the minute she wants to do something that is actually smart, he goes, you can't just agree to love me and then take it back because you don't think it's what's best for me. That's not how it works. The fucking audacity of men. Oh my god. Oh my god, what an emotionally manipulative asshole. You are kidding me. You know when he's asking you to give him a chance and give him a choice, but he doesn't want to give you a choice? Oh my god. Please tell me this is not the plot twist of this book. Girly pop, I don't think this is made up. The call is coming from inside the house, baby girl. That would actually be hot of you. Do you want to bite it? Not even Vin will bite this. This is how you know it's bad. Now, let me tell you something right now. I have never been this happy that a video is over, first of all. And never will I ever pick up another Colleen Hoover book. I'm done with Miss Colleen Hoover. I don't like it. I'm not for it. The fact that, once more, she utilizes somebody's trauma, her character's trauma, completely a choice on her end as an author, and she utilizes that as a plot twist with no trigger warnings, with no warning whatsoever. And all of these books are pitched, sold, put on the shelf as romance books, is something that continues to rub me the wrong way. But what it communicates to a lot of readers is that it's okay if romance looks like this. It's okay if you decide to forgive people for things like these. And I think in this particular book, there's a lot more gray area, because the act that leads to a lot in this book is not necessarily insidious, but him befriending her, I would say, is pretty insidious, only because he is aware of a really big thing that concerns her, and he does not disclose that ever up until she finds out. And not only that, but then the author, Colleen Hoover, as a choice, makes her ask for his forgiveness at the end, when that is not something that she needs to request, ask, or do anything with. If anything, he should be apologizing, and even then it's not his job to apologize if he doesn't want to do it. She has nothing to apologize for. And the fact that that is the route she takes as an author of, yes, once more, let me grab my female character and put her in a position where she succumbs in a way to the male character, and that she is the one that needs to apologize because as a woman, she's in the wrong. Vin is also scratching the couch. She is also angry. And so this is definitely the worst book I've read in this video. I think the way a lot of things are phrased are just fucking terrible. The fact that in his letter is like, well, you've got two options, and one of them is to just stop reading the manuscript and to come forgive me. Again, it really is the lack of nuance that bothers me in every single one of her books, but in this one in particular, the fact that her trauma is continuously brushed away, it's just so nonsensical to me. And again, not asking for it to be wholly realistic, but at least make it make sense. At least make these conversations that are so sensitive be navigated in a way that makes sense. Even if that is not the intent of the book, sometimes impact trumps intent. We know this. But it really is the fact that inadvertently, authors with these sorts of plot lines and stories can end up glorifying, normalizing, desensitizing people to the idea that this is what love is supposed to be, that it's okay if love looks like this. And no, if love looks like this, run away. Because you should never be put in a situation like this where you associate demeaning words, demeaning behavior, and toxicity as words of affirmation and love. And so I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And listen, young adult, middle grade, all of that is just an age suggestion. But I know if I would have read this in high school, and it's like full disclosure, I'm not innocent of those things, but I know if I would have read this in high school without having sort of the proper tools and knowledge to distinguish one thing from the next, I probably would have loved this. I probably would have looked at this and gone, oh my God, Ben is so cute. Look at how he treats her and loves her. And that is the sad reality. I know a lot of people are gonna be mad with me about this subject matter as well, because there's a lot of people who love these books, and don't get me wrong, that's not my intention. I never want to shit on whatever people are reading and liking and enjoying. If it gets people reading, that's one thing altogether. But I do think there's bigger conversations to be had about this. That's the bottom line for me. I'm not rating this, because if I have to rate this on a scale from 1 to 5, I will probably have an aneurysm, and I don't want to go through that. So yes, that is where I cap this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a massive thumbs up down below, and leave me a comment down below as well. Have you read any of these books? Have you read Colleen Hoover? What do you think about these books? What do you think about the conversation overall? I'd love to have you guys pitched in, because I think it is a great conversation and discussion to be had, obviously in the most respectful way possible, because I know this is very sensitive, but I'd love to hear you guys' takes down in the comments if you want to leave that. Don't forget to subscribe down below if you haven't done so already, and if you want to support the channel further, I do have a Patreon. It is linked down below. You'd be able to see me read books like these on live shows and see like my live reactions and be able to pitch in on the chat, which is always super fun. And also you guys will find out about video projects beforehand, and just a bunch of other stuff, book clubs, Discord servers, readathons, the whole 9 yards. We are also doing a little rebranding come the new year, and I'm super excited for it. That is it for today. I love you guys so much, and I shall see you on the next one. Bye guys.